This was a rogue operation, that it was not authorized.
We still don't know what happened to the remains of Mr. Khashoggi. How is that possible?
We don't have a history of murdering our citizens.
16 months have gone by since the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed by agents of his own state in Istanbul. But the issue doesn't go away. My guest this week here at the Munich Security Conference is Adel Al-Jubeir, the Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. Why are there still so many unanswered questions about the murder, and why the massive crackdown on human rights activists inside Saudi Arabia? Adel Al-Jubeir, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Nice to be here.
It's around 16 months since agents of your state murdered Jamal Khashoggi in cold blood in your consulate in Istanbul. What's striking in retrospect is that 3 days later your Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman told the Turkish authorities to search the consulate and added, "We have nothing to hide." Remarkable statement, because in fact the last 16 months have been full of aspects of this case that you have hidden right from the start and gone on hiding. Isn't that the truth?
I don't believe so. We have said that this was a rogue operation, that it was not authorized. We have investigated the people who were part of this operation. Charges were leveled against 11 of them. 5 of them were facing the death penalty. The trial began in January. The trial was attended by representatives of the permanent 5 countries on the Security Council, plus Turkey.
I'd like to talk about the trial, but straight away after the event, let's just take that expansive offer from the Crown Prince to search your consulate. It was another 10 days before Turkish investigators were actually allowed into the building. Why so long if you had nothing to hide?
I'm not a technical person, but I understand that there are situations where countries have to agree on the mechanics and the modalities of how you want people to enter sovereign territory. You have to agree on the equipment, you have to agree on the scope, and you have to agree. No country will allow another country full access to a diplomatic facility. That just doesn't happen.
The UN Special Rapporteur Agnes Callamard didn't see it that way. She found credible evidence pointing to the crime scenes having been thoroughly, even forensically clean. These indicate, she said, that the Saudi investigation was not carried out in good faith and that it may amount to obstructing justice.
With all due respect, Agnes Callamard did not have a mandate for this. She relied on sources from the newspapers and on leaks to the media. She didn't have any experts in forensics and other issues.
But it's a safe assumption, isn't it? You clean up a crime scene immediately, you're hiding something.
It's not a safe assumption. The issue with Agnes Callamard is she wrote a report based on news reports, and then she accused Saudi Arabia before he even started. Look at her record when it comes to Saudi Arabia for a number of years and how disparaging and how negative she has been against Saudi Arabia.
Well, a lot of people are disparaging these days about Saudi Arabia because of your human rights record, aren't they?
I take exception with this. Saudi Arabia has made great progress in terms of human rights. Saudi Arabia has made great progress in terms of reform, in terms of empowering women, in terms of empowering youth, in terms of opening up society, in terms of diversifying our economy, in terms of reducing our reliance on oil. Saudi Arabia is moving very, very quickly in a very positive direction under the guidance and direction of the Crown Prince.
We'll come on to the details of that, and I want to take you up on that. But the list of unanswered questions about the murder itself is extensive, isn't it? We still don't know what happened to the remains of Mr. Khashoggi. How is that possible when you allegedly have all the criminals involved behind bars? How do you not know?
They have said that they had a local collaborator who disposed of the body. And
Where?
That's it. I don't know. I mean,
didn't your interrogators ask them?
I am not the public prosecutor. We do foreign policy. We don't do criminal investigations.
But you have been speaking on behalf of the state.
I have been speaking of the state, telling you what we did, and what we did is what every other country did. The United States had Abu Ghraib in Iraq.
But we're not talking about the US.
I am talking about the US. Committed outrageous crimes. Did the president authorize it?
And they were scrutinized
Did the commander,
the same way you're being scrutinized.
Yes, and what they did is they investigated, they held people accountable, they put in place mechanisms to prevent it from happening. That's what governments do.
Who was this so-called cooperator who took away the body, or the remains?
I don't know. We don't have a history of murdering our citizens.
But if you're as sorry as you claim to be over this incident, why haven't you found out this information as a matter of urgency and told Mr. Khashoggi's family? Because that would be a humanitarian gesture.
We have sent a number of legal documents to the Turkish authorities asking for information, and we have not received anything except one.
You haven't told us either who you think masterminded this murder. Surely the trial must have shown up an answer to that.
It was a mistake. People exceeded their authorities, and this happened. The people who committed Abu Ghraib did not do it under the authority of the President or the Vice President or the Secretary of Defense.
The US government isn't buying your version of events, is it? The CIA has let it be known in briefings that it has medium to high confidence that it was your Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who ordered the killing.
We don't see it this way. The President and the Secretary of State have said this is not the case.
Largest intelligence agency in the world, unmatched resources. You tell me they're talking nonsense?
I can only tell you what the US President, who's the Commander-in-Chief of the US Armed Forces, and what the Secretary of State have said publicly.
But if it was nonsense, how do you explain the phone conversation intercepted by US spy agencies in 2017, in which the Crown Prince told a top aide he'd use a bullet on Khashoggi if he didn't stop his criticism?
I don't know anything about this, and I can't comment about something that appears in newspapers based on anonymous sources, even if those anonymous sources are attributed to intelligence agencies.
The UN acknowledges that it's been an important step, this trial, towards accountability, but says it's failed to meet procedural and substantive standards. Trial has been held behind closed doors.
Who in the US said this?
The report from the special rapporteur.
The special rapporteur is biased. The special rapporteur...
Why? Because you don't agree with her.
Exceeded her authority. The special rapporteur says the trial was secret. How can a trial be secret when we have representatives from the 5 permanent members of the Security Council plus Turkey? How can it be secret?
The trial was held behind closed doors. The identity of those charged has not been released, nor the identity of those facing the death penalty. Why?
The decision of opening up a trial or not rests with the judge. And if the judge does not want to have a courtroom that looks like a circuit, it's his prerogative to close the trial. Now, the representatives from the other countries who were there have access to all the proceedings, and they know the names of the people.
Why were they told not to speak about it?
Because we want to make sure that when the trial is over and charges are leveled, the punishment is announced and people can see it. You cannot accuse somebody who turns out to be innocent, and then in the end they lose face, society shuns them.
They've been sentenced to death.
Not all of them.
5 of them have been sentenced to death.
1 of them have been investigated, and I believe 10 or 11 have been charged. 5
have been sentenced to death. Why can't we know their names? You're not going to change the verdict on them,
because the trial is not over. There's going to be an appeal, and it has to be reviewed by the Supreme Court. This is how all court systems work.
Mr. Al-Jubair, let's deal with the final explanation that you and others in this government would have us believe, that it was somehow a rogue operation. This team of high-level operatives, some of whom had in the past travelled with the Crown Prince, decided they just had to go and kill Mr. Khashoggi, did they? They went out on a limb like that.
I believe they want to talk to him and they want to convince him to come back to Saudi Arabia. Something went terribly wrong and an altercation happened and he was murdered.
They went with an autopsy expert who had a bone saw with him.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that.
But everybody else seems to know about it.
I don't care what anybody says. I don't know about that. The idea is that this was authorized is ridiculous. This was a rogue operation that happened that should not have happened. We're paying a great price for it. It's a terrible tragedy, and the issue is we deal with it from a legal perspective. Jamal Khashoggi's family has come out and said, we have confidence in the Saudi judicial system. They're the family that's most affected by this.
What are they supposed to say? They're still in Saudi Arabia. But your agents didn't bother to hide what they did, didn't bother to disguise their actions at all. One of them, according to transcripts of their bugged conversation, was heard talking into a telephone immediately after the murder, saying, tell yours, the thing is done, it's done. So who was he talking to?
It turns out this is not correct. I don't believe this is correct. I don't know. This was from leaks. I haven't seen the intercepts that the Turks had. But if Turkey had all of this information, why didn't they provide it to Jamal Khashoggi before he went to the consulate, if they believe this is the case?
If you are insisting that it's a rogue operation, answer me one question. Why were the people who were involved, who didn't sneak in by night and sneak out again, they came in private jets, they were on diplomatic passports, checking into, they left a trail everywhere. They left a trail everywhere. So by murdering him, assuming they weren't authorized to do it, they were signing their own death warrants. What rogue operatives would do that?
That's why they're facing, a number of them are facing the death penalty and others are facing life.
And why would they do that? What's the motive for writing your own death sentence?
I don't know. I think they went in to talk to him. They went in to try to convince him to come back. Something went terribly wrong and he was killed. And they are being on trial now, and a number of them are facing the death penalty.
Much more likely is it that they fully intended to kill him. Otherwise, why do you take the autopsy expert
Why do you have
with
to
you?
assume? Why do you have to assume the worst when it comes to Saudi Arabia? Operations go wrong.
This is a pretty bad thing to have happened. Nobody's assuming the worst here. The worst happened.
Abu Ghraib was pretty bad.
And they got a lot of bad publicity for it. But we're not talking about the United States. We got a lot of bad
publicity for it, and we're dealing with it, and we're putting people on trial, and we will be punishing them.
One of the key questions that keeps returning is whether the Crown Prince created an environment which allowed his agents to behave in the way they did in Istanbul. You would tell me that's not true, wouldn't you?
Of course not. The Crown Prince is the driving force behind change in Saudi Arabia. He's the driving force behind empowering women and men in Saudi Arabia, youth. He's the driving force behind economic opening and economic reforms.
And of increasing repression against those who dare think and act in an independent fashion.
I disagree with that. He's the driving force behind entertainment and recreation in Saudi Arabia. He's the driving force behind technology and investments in technology in Saudi Arabia. He's the driving force for setting Saudi Arabia up to be a leading country in the 21st century.
Mr. Al-Jubair, in March 2017, US officials with access to classified intelligence reports told the New York Times that your Crown Prince had authorized a secret campaign to silence dissenters. That included surveillance, kidnapping, detention and torture, so-called rapid intervention team.
I'm not going to comment on news reports attributed to anonymous sources.
Some came from Saudi officials as well.
Anonymous sources.
Seems there was a standing order to Saudi intelligence to bring dissidents home.
Anonymous sources. I cannot comment on anonymous sources.
What about one of them who was brought home? Nawaf al-Rashid, a poet. In 2018, he was on a trip to Kuwait, stopped at the airport, forcibly returned to Saudi Arabia.
I don't have the details of this.
He was held incommunicado for 12 months, never charged with anything.
I don't have the details on this case.
No Saudi citizen is actually safe if they speak out against your government, are they?
That's not correct. People come and see the king in his majlis, they see the crown prince in his majlis, they communicate with them, they tell them what they think, they express criticism, they provide ideas, they provide suggestions. This is what Saudi Arabia has been for centuries.
Amnesty International said last year that virtually all Saudi Arabian human rights defenders and independent voices, male and female, are behind bars, serving lengthy sentences handed down by your specialized criminal court. Most were prosecuted, they said, for their peaceful human rights work and calls for reforms.
I take issue with that. The country is on a major path to reform, and anybody who calls for reform is part of that process. Why would we have reforms in Saudi Arabia and then criticize people who call for reform? There are other issues that people have been charged with and have been sentenced with, and I believe that the reports that we get are not very accurate.
Really? And so when...
And if you have any issue with the terms of the legal issues, you should really address them to the public prosecution.
Last year they also quoted a Saudi lawyer, Tahal al-Haji, who has represented many defendants before your specialized criminal court. He said, on the record, the presumption of innocence is not part of the Saudi Arabian judicial system. Chilling words, aren't they?
I disagree with his assessment. The presumption is always innocent until proven guilty.
Well, he says the opposite. He has defended many people before your court.
Unlike the positions of some of the NGOs who assume that Saudi Arabia is guilty without presuming that it's innocent. We are guilty before the case was over.
So everybody has misunderstood. Everybody who reports this massive crackdown, which the
what massive crackdown
on dissidents and people. We have the human rights groups, the international human rights groups. They're all wrong.
I will give you an example. I will give you an example, and you tell me about this hypocrisy. In the 1990s, we had radical preachers who were calling for jihad and death.
Please,
let me finish.
You just want to take us in a different direction.
You moved us in this direction. So allow me to finish. I want to point out the hypocrisy. In the 1990s, we were criticized for having radical preachers in Saudi Arabia preaching hate. When we detained them, We were criticized for taking away their freedom of speech. It's a damn if you do situation, if you don't situation. Do you want them to preach hate, or do you want them to stop? You can't have it both ways. That's the hypocrisy that we're facing.
Mr. Al-Jubair, in March last year, 36 countries, you know this, issued a joint statement expressing particular concern about your use of counter-terror legislation against individuals peacefully exercising their rights and freedom. 36 countries: Germany, France, UK, Spain, Italy, Australia. Have they also misjudged the situation in your country?
Yes.
You seem to be badly misunderstood by some of the biggest experts in the world.
Yes.
Yeah, really?
Yes.
How did that happen? How could they know so little?
They need to be more educated. We have been fighting terrorism and
That's
extremism.
scarcely credible, is it? I mean, you can sit here and say that, but that's insulting to their intelligence, isn't it?
We have laws, and there's a line between freedom of expression and incitement and murder. And we have laws in our country, and we have a court system, and people have to obey the laws, and the courts in Saudi Arabia are the ones who adjudicate these cases, and nobody else, with due respect to all the NGOs and all the human rights organizations.
And virtually every human rights activist is sitting in jail.
That's not true.
Why would they make it up? Do they make up things?
That's
Amnesty
not true.
International, do they make things up?
They asked...
What did they last make up?
We were charged with detaining women for asking for the right to drive. That's not true. Why would you detain somebody for asking for a right that the king already granted?
Yes, why would you?
Because...
The question is to you, because you did.
Because that's not the charge.
Because you did. It may not be the charge, but that's the reality, isn't it?
No, that's the wrong perception. They were involved with foreign governments trying to recruit people in sensitive positions in order to obtain sensitive documents to be used by our enemies. That's called espionage. And the prosecution, when the trials are over, will present the evidence.
You can call it what you like, but you're saying they were actually a threat to the Saudi state.
It seems to me, yes, that's what the prosecution is saying. I don't have access to the courts. I can only go by what the entity in Saudi Arabia that's charged with filing charges and that's charged with prosecuting people in terms of trials, and that's their position. And they have been public about it.
Last month, Mr. Al-Jubair, you addressed the European Parliament in Brussels, and you strongly objected to the scrutiny and criticism that has come your way from MEPs. If you object to that so much, why sign up to international agreements which involve other countries monitoring your compliance? Or do you just accept it only when it's in your favour?
What do you mean monitoring our compliance?
Monitoring compliance with agreements you've signed.
Such as?
Such as torture, for instance.
You're
supposed to have outlawed torture, but there are many accusations that torture is practiced.
And they can bring the charges. They can bring the charges to a court in Saudi Arabia, and the court will review it, and it will be investigated.
You tell the Parliament, stop criticising our causes. We are a sovereign nation that refuses to be patronised.
Yes.
You're a member of the United Nations. You're there for scrutiny.
We do not criticize other countries' legal systems, and we will not allow other countries to criticize our legal system.
But if you don't want that kind of attention, don't go abroad kidnapping your own people or forcing them to go back to your country.
There's a legal system, there's a legal process.
That's not what states do when they promise to respect human rights.
Saudi Arabia does not accept people criticizing our legal system. We have not criticized the UK or France or Germany or Sweden.
Well, you're perfectly at liberty to.
We don't, because we believe this is your system. We have not criticized how people in Europe treat minorities or immigrants. We have not criticized Europe for its horrific past when it came to massive crimes against humanity. We don't do this. And we will not accept criticism of our legal system by others.
But if you go on doing these things, how can you expect your expensive charm offensive to call on anything but deaf ears? All the money you pay for PR companies, expensive PR companies in Washington, D.C., where you were ambassador, falls on deaf ears, doesn't it?
We don't have an expensive charm offensive. We have public relations companies like other countries do, and the amounts are not outrageous. The amounts are normal. We present our case to people, and we have people come and visit, and we engage with people in dialogue so that they can see what Saudi Arabia is about. We have seen foreign investment in Saudi Arabia go up. We have seen foreign visitors to Saudi Arabia go up. We have seen foreign entrepreneurs come to Saudi Arabia to set up shop.
But people are not buying your message.
I'm telling you
that
the
you're
facts.
protecting human rights.
I'm telling you these are the facts.
There is unanimity among the human rights organizations around the world that you are in the middle of a massive repression of human rights.
We disagree with that.
I know you can disagree.
That's what they think. That's their business. We disagree with that. Our people, our economy is doing well. Our country is attracting foreign investment.
That's nothing to do with human rights, is it?
If Saudi Arabia were so bad, nobody would come. Why would companies invest
Oh,
billions
they'll
of
always
dollars
come
in
and
Saudi
do
Arabia?
business. They'll always come and do business. You know that.
Why would entrepreneurs come and set up shop in Saudi
Because
Arabia?
they can make money, that's it. It's nothing to do with your human rights
I disagree
record,
with
is
you.
it? It's nothing to do with
I think your mind is made up and you don't want to see the facts. Come to Saudi Arabia and see for yourself.
You told the Parliament, stop lecturing and start working with us. We have a court system. The court system is independent. We don't allow anyone to question. Just what you said to me. How do you suggest Europe works with you when you slam the door in its face like that?
In what sense slam the door?
Stop lecturing and start working with us.
Yes, we will not accept lectures.
It's not a lecture.
It's a lecture.
They're telling you the results.
It's a lecture based
They're telling you the results of their research.
It's a lecture based on lack of information of the Saudi legal system and how it works. It's a lecture based on information that they obtained either through hearsay or through inaccurate sources.
Government agencies.
Which ones?
36 countries that expressed their concern to you. I gave you the details.
And there were a large number of countries that have offered a resolution counter to this.
And those 36 countries were absolutely wrong, were absolutely mistaken. How could they get it so wrong? They've been going to your country for years, talking to your people for years. It beggars belief that you can put up this smoke screen and expect that people are going to believe it.
You can believe whatever you want to believe. Saudi Arabia is a country that's on a path of reform. We are broadening our economy. We are diversifying our economy from oil. We are opening up new areas for investment. We are empowering
Nobody worries about
women.
that. Nobody worries about your economy.
We are creating opportunity for our young people. 70% of Saudis are under the age of 30. They have hopes, dreams and ambitions, and the government's objective is to provide them with the ability to realize those.
You keep saying this. My question to you is, why should Europe work with a country that completely trashes its values and rights that are central to Europe's foundation?
Because I believe that assessment is wrong.
And where would the starting point be?
I believe that is wrong. 60 years ago, we didn't have schools for girls. Today, 55% of college students are women. 80 years ago, life expectancy in Saudi Arabia was 37 years old.
Again, I ask you, where do you start?
Today, it's in the mid-70s at the level of Europe.
Where do you start when, in the view of major countries around the world and human rights organizations, you have so little respect for basic human rights?
I don't buy that assessment.
You haven't changed their mind, have you?
I don't buy that assessment.
You spoke at the Parliament. You told them your view. They're not buying it.
That's their prerogative. I'm not buying their view either.
The major countries?
I'm not buying their view either.
So where do they start? There's no starting point, is there?
If you look at education, if you look at healthcare, if you look at life expectancy...
We're not. We're looking at human rights.
That's all human rights. That is all human rights. If you look at media...
What is healthcare to them if they're in jail for years without charges?
We have more than 20 million Saudis. Are they all in jail?
Nobody said they were all in jail.
You're telling me they're all in jail.
I said human rights activists are in jail.
You see them as activists, we don't.
As Amnesty said, hardly any of them...
We don't see them as activists.
Hardly any of them are not behind bars.
With all due respect to Amnesty International, we have a court system. We have a public prosecution that brought charges against them. The courts will adjudicate these cases, and if they're innocent, they will be released, and if they're guilty, they will be punished. It's as simple as that. And with all due respect to Amnesty International, their opinion doesn't matter.
They say that the trials are inherently unfair. It does matter because it informs public opinion. And public opinion around the world, as you know, is not exactly trusting what goes on in Saudi Arabia. Who do you think people trust? Human rights organizations who give accurate information about every country in the world, or a state that has everything to lose if it admits to these human rights abuses?
I disagree with that.
Who are they going to believe?
I think that we have great relations with a large number of countries. We have the presidency of the G20. We're doing a lot of major projects in Saudi Arabia. We're doing a lot of reforms in Saudi Arabia. We're improving the standard of living of our people. We're becoming part of the global community.
So what are you saying? You don't care about what people think about your human rights?
I say we don't have the problem with human rights. We have a legal system. We have laws that people have to obey. If they don't obey those laws, there will be charges filed against them, and they will have to face the courts. Very simple. In the United Kingdom, the same thing would happen. If somebody violates the law, what do? Do I come to you and tell you this person was engaged in human rights when they killed somebody, or when they spied for somebody, or when they...
Adel Jubair, we're not talking about the United Kingdom. We're not talking. You would like to talk, I know, about every country except Saudi Arabia.
That's not true. I'm giving you an example because I believe you have not been fair in your views of Saudi Arabia and in the positions
Not my views. These are the views that are quoted extensively.
In the questions that you've articulated, and I wanted to be able to show you that there's a universal issue here. When you have a law, the law has to be obeyed. If you don't like the law, change it. But as long as it's on the books, you have to obey it.
Adel Jubair, thank you very much for being on Conflict Zone.
You're welcome. Thank you.